restore our farm soils and profit. Just a tiny bit on where I come from. It's a bloody long way from here. And a certainly different rainfall. 600 mil rainfall, central New South Wales, granite soils, and myself and my son on the property. Do a few different enterprises. Mostly we've been in sheep, merino sheep. My great-grandparents settled there in the 1860s. They started with merino sheep. I still run merino sheep, which shows my lack of intelligence. Still running merino sheep. But a little bit of cattle trading when seasons allow. But as well as the Kelpie stud that's just been mentioned, we run a merino stud as well. And grow about 500 acres of crops. And that's all done differently. As I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But yeah, 4,000 merino sheep on that. One other thing too, probably the more important, we harvest native grasses off our property now. It's just part of what we do. So there's a few different enterprises on there. Just while we're talking about enterprises, and this property here is a good example of it, different types of things that we can do that that certainly different to what we have traditionally done. We can add enterprises to properties that will complement income, and providing they are compatible ecologically, in other words, enhance the property, and compatible ecologically and financially, then they'll work. They need to complement the rest of the property. So, and it's only limited by your imagination. So there's a few good ways now that we can do this if you think long and hard about it. So, how can we be more profitable? To be more profitable, we really need to know what's gone wrong. And that's the crux of the whole thing. Now, if you think nothing's gone wrong on properties, history tells us that the wheels have fallen off just about every civilization that started. And most of the reason why they've collapsed is soil. They've stuffed their soil in the process. And countries now all over the world, agriculture is collapsing in all countries. Pre-virus, I've had the opportunity to go to other countries and do talks and things. And America is basically stuffed really politically as well. No, I won't get into politics. But agriculturally, they had some of the best soil in the world, but it's really struggling. They've had 300 years to stuff their soil. We've only had 200. But that's happening all over the world. So it's certainly, we're not just talking about Australia or individual farms or anything here. It's a global thing. Okay. So, many paddocks and whole properties have become unproductive, and they're covered in weeds and dysfunctional soils and hard compacted soils. So the question is why? And one of the most common things I see when travelling around is the first thing you see is soil structure decline. And Oliver touched on that a minute ago. And soils, and you need to get water in, all that sort of stuff. Soil structure seems to be the first thing that you see when you walk onto a property. Most of the soils are like concrete. If they're like concrete, water's running off, you're not going to be able to grow much on that, as it is. But it can be fixed. This is not all about misery, I might add. It does get a bit happier. So, and the reasons why are fairly simple, really. Ploughing and cultivating is one of the worst things we've ever done on this planet in regard to agriculture. Extremely destructive. Destroys soils, soil life, creates poor structured soils. Grazing management is the next big worst thing that we've done, other maybe than rabbits introduced in this country. Because if you leave animals on the property, on a paddock all the time or a property all the time without giving plants time to recover, you'll start losing plants. I'm going to talk a tiny bit more about that later. And excessive use of fertiliser and pesticides. That is not the case in your pastoral areas here. But in the cropping areas, it certainly is. So, how can we fix our farms? How can we fix our soil nutrient decline, insect attack, diseases? While we're doing that, how can we be productive and profitable? So can we fix those things that go wrong with our properties? And how can that be done without spending a heap of money? Because when we look to get some advice on this, every bastard wants to sell us something. So we know before we get advice, someone wants to sell us something. We don't necessarily need to buy anything, or very much. We can certainly buy a lot less than we used to. So, and this is not an anti-fertiliser or pesticide talk. I'm not an organic farmer, still use some inputs. So, although fertiliser and pesticides can certainly be an aid to agriculture and our farms, they have created many problems for our farm ecosystem, soil and profit. Now, while that word farm ecosystem's up there, no one talks about farms as ecosystems, but they are. If our farms get dysfunctional, or we need to put more fertiliser on, or we're not carrying many livestock as we used to, there's a fair chance that the farm ecosystem has collapsed. Now, the main way to fix it is fix the farm ecosystem. In other words, get everything functioning again on the farm. And that can be anything from insects to birds and everything. So that's one way to do it, and that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about. So, increasing fertiliser and pesticides will not fix our farms. As I said a while ago, the farm and soil ecosystems are collapsed, as well as the farm itself. On top of the ground has collapsed. Our soils have collapsed. Our soil ecosystems have also become dysfunctional and, in many cases, totally collapsed. So, how can we fix that? So, farm soils become dysfunctional, and that's why, in cropping and more higher input type country, that's why we need to add ever increasing amount of fertiliser and pesticides on our farms to maintain crop yields and and pasture yields. So, if we allow the farm to function as an ecosystem, we'll certainly have better nutrient cycling, better soil nutrient cycling, which means less fertiliser. No insect attack, no insecticide. Plant disease, no fungicide, less animal disease. You'll certainly have less problems in grazing enterprises as well, less costs involved. And that adds up to more profit. So, and guess what? We need to start by fixing our soil. We need to start from the ground up, or from below the ground up. So, and this can only be done by growing more plants. This stuff's really simple. There is nothing complicated about it, and there is nothing expensive about it. It is really simple. Grow more plants. Plants will restore our farm, soils and profit. So how do we change, and what do we change to? I'm going to come back to all this in a minute. So if we modify, and we're only talking about modifying here, we don't need huge changes, but if we modify the way we graze animals and grow crops and pastures, we can restore soil structure, we can improve nutrient cycling, we can improve water infiltration, fix soil structure, can improve water holding capacity and increase soil carbon and organic matter. All of that will reduce inputs, fertiliser and pesticides and increase profit. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about, not much, but a little bit about grazing management here. You like that slide? It tells everything about cattle. That's why I don't run them very often. Now, this has happened all over the world. There's nothing new or different about this, but the way we graze animals generally isn't working. In fact, animals grazing have created deserts all over the world. And around the Middle East, goats in particular there have been grazing there for thousands of years. They're just wandering around eating everything. And now we all know that there's pretty well a desert in that area. So everyone blames the goat. And it's not the poor old goat's fault, it's the management of those goats that's the problem. It's the human managing them. So even in those areas, if those goats weren't allowed to wander around just eating whatever they wanted, there's a fair chance we wouldn't have even had a desert there today in most of that country. And remember, that area is like old Mesopotamia. It was one of the most fertile areas on the planet at one time. So, and what I'm talking about here, and I realise a lot of people have struggled with a grazing rotation, but it's bloody simple. There's nothing complicated about it at all. So, but the grazing rotation needs to be all we're trying to do with it is let plants recover before they're grazed again. And we know that because I bet your fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers did this. They'd rest a paddock. There's nothing new about it. They'd rest a paddock. And that's fine. And this is sort of just fine-tuning that a little bit more and giving time for plants to recover before they're grazed again. And in this environment here, that can be a long time before they get back to where they started from. But it works, and it works in any environment. While I think of it, it's fairly obvious too. In grazing enterprises, we need to make sure that we, to start with, are not carrying any more animals than the property will carry. And we're working within the constraints of the environment that we are in. So if you're here or in really high rainfall or wherever you are, you adjust it to that. You don't manage this country as though it's 600 or 700 mil rainfall. So, but if we allow plants to recover before they're grazed again, we will increase perennial grassland species. We will decrease weeds and we will restore the soil ecosystem. That's just what I do at home, which is totally irrelevant to here. But just what I do at home, we run all the adult sheep together and all the young ones together. When we've got cattle, we just put them in with the sheep. And we allow 3 to 4 months recovery period. That's in our rainfall. Here, it would need to be a lot longer than that. A lot longer than 3 or 4 months. So, now, with that little bit on grazing, I've given you enough information to be dangerous to yourself. So, we need to, if you really want, there's some really good grazing courses out there. Millie's going to talk a little bit about grazing later. So, I'm not going to go any further into it than that. So, in growing crops for grain or stock feed or forage, ploughing's been a major cause of degraded soil and destroyed grasslands. Not only in these areas and south of here, ploughing has been incredibly destructive. Modern cropping methods, as in zero tilling now, is definitely an improvement, but we've simply replaced the plough with a boom spray and pesticides. So we really haven't advanced as much as we think we have in regard to growing crops. It's better, there's no doubt about that. Zero tilling is far better than ploughing, but we need to have a look at maybe we can improve on that as well. So how do we change? Really simple, change the way crops are grown. So single species of crops are a large part of the problem. We grow monocultures of crops. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about perennial and annual cover cropping. It's sort of being adopted around the world now, much of this. They can help restore the farm ecosystem and soil ecosystem. This is just certainly not possible in this environment, not that much ground cover, but in saying that you can, but anyway, another story. Annual cover crops, I'm talking about annual plants now, create ground cover, control weeds, conserve moisture, many of those things, and help restore the soil just with that ground cover. And guess what? It looks like a vegetable garden, doesn't it? I won't go into it, but it should be compulsory for every farmer on this planet to watch Costa's gardening show, Harry Costa, every Sunday, because the gardening principles, many of them should be applied to agriculture. Especially, I'm talking about in the cropping side of growing things, that side of things. So, the stuff I developed, which is pasture cropping, is actually perennial cover cropping. And there are advantages of it in these sorts. I'm not talking about north of here, but south of here can be an advantage. And I'll give you a little example in a minute in West Australia. This is really, this was just this year, sowing oats into that grass, that's a native grass, into a cover of perennial summer growing grass. That was like maybe sowing oats into that. Looks fairly wild, and you'd reckon never grow a crop in that. But these plants are dormant. They're gone to sleep for the winter. And it's interesting too, many of those summer grasses did grow originally in these sorts of environments. So just a couple of quick slides here now. Just a sequence of crop sown into that sort of litter. That's a crop later on in September, just before harvest. About harvest, the crop oats, and harvesting. Now, because these grasses are summer growing, they've come out of their winter dormancy by that stage. So, in other words, we haven't lost anything. Now, I show that photo to people all around the world. Depending on whether you're a fully dedicated cropper or you're much of your interest or is either mixed farming or you're running animals as well. Two ways you look at it. The cropping fellas, the continuous cropping blokes, will say, oh, geez, look at all the weeds in that crop. The graziers will say, oh, look at all the feed in that crop. Depends on which way you look at this. So it's come out of dormancy. Because these grasses don't like being in the shade, the crop suppresses them, and so we can still get reasonable harvest off them. So that's just very quickly on that side of it. We can grow good crops into living but dormant perennial grasses. Okay, example in West Australia. This work had been done for a while now in West Australia. Trials by the Department of Ag. Now that's Gatton Panic, which is an introduced summer growing perennial grass. They've planted there, planted that, and then grown a crop of barley in it. Yield was 2.85 tonnes per hectare. And interestingly, West Australia is similar, has less summer rainfall than you get here, or at least south of here. So it can be done in these sorts of environments. That's a lot harsher environment, summer-wise, than you have here. And you've got far better soils. I mean, that's growing on sand, really, in West Australia. Where's Lynn? Sorry, Lynn. Don't want to criticise your soil. So it can be done in these sorts of environments, and it's showing that in the trials and the adoption in West Australia. And that's not a native grass, it's an introduced perennial that can be sown. Now, if we move on further from that, multi-species crops and cover crops, these, again, wherever you're running livestock, that's just an example. Some of these multi-species crops sown into grass, so the dry stuff there is just the dormant native grasses. That's a mix that we use: oats, forage, brassica, tillage, radish, turnip, veg, clover, field pea, turnip. There's no rules in this. Whatever you've got in the silo or whatever you can buy fairly cheaply.
Are you letting that seed
I have done at times. Good question. I should answer it later, but I will answer it now. If you, that particular crop, I let it set seed, just oats and all that there, and harvest it as a mix. Because I am a bit of a rat bag. Now, can we harvest this mixed range crop? It looked a wild crop. I haven't got the photo here. I took it out, this one. But we did actually harvest the whole lot, and then we put it through a seed cleaner and separated those seeds. But I just wanted to find it was in it. But I just used that to sow it again. It would make good stock feed. It'd be great for pigs or chooks. But I just use it to sow it again as another crop. Yeah.
But normally you're sort of grazing it off before it's...
Yes, yeah, just like you'd normally graze, say, an oat crop. And you can, like, most of those you remove with animals, and the oats or the cereal in there will recover. Most of those, the rest of them won't. So you can harvest a straight oat crop if you graze it at the right time. So the advantages of that, and I'm not going to dwell on this too much, we get really high quality stock feed. I'm going to show you a trial we did in a minute. Fast improvements in soil health, soil structure, carbon and nutrient cycling. If we put legumes in there, we can add nitrogen as well for a following crop. Weed control, we can get some really good insect control with flowering plants and to attract beneficial insects. So we can control insects with these types of crops as well, the crop damaging insects. And we can harvest a cereal crop, like I just said. Now we need to remember, or be aware of, these multi-species crops are also biological soil primers. They will prime the soil and stimulate soil microbiology and kickstart our soils. It can be a really fast way of jump-starting our soils and improving our soils. Not going to do it overnight, but it can be the first step in doing that. So, excellent stock feed. Healthy animals, faster fattening. I'm just going to go on to the trial itself. This is a trial funded, Landcare / MLA funded trial. I could see that the lambs were doing really well on these multi-species crops. There was no data in Australia, and I contacted a few mates in the US that I knew, no data in the US on how animals performed on these multi-species crops. Even though I saw good results, and many people that have adopted them, those multi-species crops, were reporting great animal performance on them. In fact, I introduced multi-species crops into Australia in about 2010, and it's the fastest adoption of anything I've ever seen in Australia. Like, people just grab it and run with it because they can see great benefits in their livestock enterprises, fattening, finishing, animal performance. As we show in this here, that was a mix. A bit different to the other one, but a similar type mix. Put fertiliser on it, use a herbicide to take out weeds, a selective herbicide to take out weeds in it. So they're just two crops. $183 for the multi-species, $140 for the that increase. That's just seed and fertiliser. No machinery costs. Grazing results, very interesting. I'm not going to go through all this now. Weight gain, one was barley and the other was multi-species crop. On the barley, the lambs, well, they were split into two mobs, and the paddocks were the same size, 6 hectares, only small areas. We were trying this on. 145 grams compared to 300. They were double weight gains on the multi-species compared to the barley. And after 57 days, which was 2 months, around about what it was, 2 months, 8.5 kilos on the barley and 17 kilos on the multi-species crop. If we go right down the bottom and look at profit, 1,100, I might add, lamb's worth $7 a kilo then. They're bloody not worth that now. so forget about it. This was in 2020. So $1,100 profit there and $2,000 there, so double the profit. But even if lambs are $100 now, which is a bit more than that, but not much, they're still double the profit down the bottom. So. Now, one of the things that we weren't expecting was this. along many things we measured, one was soil chemistry and carbon and that side of things. So under the multi-species crop, the carbon increased by 21%, and under the single species crop, the barley, it declined by 15%. Was not expecting that. And that was only in about a 6-month period, the difference between the first measurement and the second one. Nitrogen increased by plus 16, minus 21. Phosphorus, both increased to phosphorus, plus 125 and plus 62%. Calcium, magnesium also. Not all the minerals, not all the nutrients, minerals increased. Some of them either stayed the same or decreased. But these main ones did, which was a surprise, especially in that short time frame. So trials and research. The property at home is one of the most researched properties in Australia. And the reason why is that I started doing all this strange stuff in the early 90s, and I saw things happening like plants growing that were never there before. I changed to grazing and I started pasture cropping. So I was getting softer soils and perennial grasses were returning, all these things. And I thought, gee, no bastards going to believe this. I said, we better start measuring it. So, which I did, and research organisations became involved. CSIRO did. Most of the universities in Australia did. Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra unis got involved in it. And so we collected a lot of data on this. And it is apparently the most researched farm in Australia. So we got this documented pretty well. So all that I did was change the grazing management, and I changed the way I grew crops, and then in 2010, well, this is in 1993, and then I started growing multi-species crops from 2010 on. Restored the grassland at home. It was just a paddock full of weeds. It was 60% weeds when we first started, and now it's over 80% native perennial species. Weeds increased to almost zero, and the native species increased from 5 to 50. Perennial species, 5 to 60. So no insecticides being used. Like I mentioned before, I'm not organic, but these things sort of, it seems too good to be true, this bloody stuff. But it actually, this stuff actually happened. It's one of the things that people struggle with. How can this stuff happen? But all we're really doing is working closer to natural systems, really. We're working closer to how our Mother Nature designed this stuff. That's all we're doing. Nothing special about it. And growing more plants, really. So, anyway, haven't used insecticide for over 25 years. We have no insect attack in crops or pasture. How? I'm going to get you to ask that question to me later when we sit down and ask questions. I've got about 5 minutes to go. So we haven't used fungicide on crops or anything for 25 years. No crops or pasture disease. How is that possible? No fertiliser. Now, this is a sort of a high input area where my father traditionally put superphosphate out every year religiously. I just stopped that, and I haven't put fertiliser on pastures for 43 years. The pastures get better and better, not worse and worse. Crop fertiliser has been reduced by 70%. The crops also get better and better. They didn't to start with. I pulled the plug out the fertiliser, but they certainly have now got better and better with less inputs, less chemical inputs. So, just a couple of photos adjoining paddock. The paddock on my right's my brother's place, and there's a fence between them. So this paddock here we've been monitoring now for 12 years, or probably more than that. And all that we did, my brother stayed the same. I changed. So we're monitoring the change in management. That's all we're doing here. And he stayed where he was, and I changed. So just a bit here. Soil carbon levels increased by 200%. That equates to, well, nearly 60 tonne of carbon per hectare. And this is over about 12 or more year period, 12, 13 year period. Now, if we're looking at carbon trading, which I won't get into, that's 60 tonnes is equivalent to 213 tonne of carbon dioxide that we've removed out, well, the plants have removed out of the atmosphere and stored in the soil. So that paddock now, oh sorry, I didn't talk about this. That soil there is the one there, and that one is the one on the right. So huge difference in soil. That's 2 feet, 500 mil of soil, and the structure of it, everything's changed right down the profile. That's a sodic clay. It's even changed. Don't ask me how. We've got plenty of soil scientists here today to will explain that, won't you all? So, Lynn's got a handle on it. If there's any really difficult questions, just ask these fellas. So, all the soil nutrients, including trace elements, have increased by an average of 162%. And that's all except sodium. Sodium and iron and hang on, I forgot the other one. Anyway, it went the other way. The stuff we don't want actually decline. All of what we do want actually increase. pH has changed from 5.2 to 6.1. Is it profitable? Now, there's $100,000 that I don't spend every year compared to when we're in my father's era of high input agriculture. I don't spend that anymore. So I'm $100,000 ahead. The only problem, got a bit of time. I'll tell this story. The only problem I got with that's over about a 25-year period or more. So I calculated there's a couple of $1 million or something involved in that savings, and $100,000 every year. And now I've got no idea where the $2 million went. It's been suggested I drank it, but it's probably right. But that's what we've been saving every year. We don't need to spend it anymore. So it is profitable. And it's profitable because of this. Annual income is higher. We're running more livestock now. Crop yields are similar. Wool quality is better. Now we harvest and sell over 2 tonne of native grasses a year. Now, native grass seed's worth about $70 a kilo, so that's worth a bit of money. Soil organic carbon levels are increasing. All those soil nutrients are increasing with that $100,000 and less labour as well. That's not counting labour savings at $100,000. So, how to restore our farms? Change the way we graze animals, change the way we grow crops. And also, something I didn't talk about in this little talk was if we're growing any pasture, which is not out here, but again, further south, make sure that it's a diverse pasture. It needs to have a lot of perennials in it, heaps and heaps of perennials in it. It can have some annuals, but mostly perennials, and great diversity. Diversity of species is the key to all of this. Of plant species, plants drive the whole thing. Plants drive soil microbial life, and we were mentioning that a while ago. And plant diversity is a big key in that and a big player in that. So if we just change those things, it's very simple, nothing complicated. So, in other words, grow more plants. Plants will restore our farms, soils and profit. Thank you. He's just about to dong me off.